Grace's hand slammed against the alarm button 3 times before the wailing siren finally cut out. The medical bay's emergency lights bathed everything in red as she stumbled backward, clutching the edge of a metal examination table, while her other hand pressed against her chest, trying to suppress another cough. The creature in the specimen container was thrashing. Not the creature, the cub. She'd been calling it a specimen for 6 rotations, trying to maintain professional distance. But watching it throw itself against the reinforced glass made her chest tighten for reasons that had nothing to do with the infection spreading to her lungs. The cub slammed into the glass again, and Grace watched its small body, maybe the size of a terrier, covered in silver-gray fur with 6 legs and eyes that shifted between purple and gold, slide down the inside of the container. It made a sound like wind through broken pipes, high and desperate. Grace doubled over as the cough finally broke free, harsh and wet. She grabbed a white medical cloth from the table, pressing it to her mouth. When she pulled it away, there were flecks of blue-green, the Kthri's infection. The same thing that killed 4 crew members last cycle. The thing she'd been working 90-hour rotations to cure, studying samples from every infected tissue, trying to find anything that could stop it. The thing she probably caught from the cub itself. She looked up at the container. The cub had stopped thrashing. It stood perfectly still, 6 legs braced, those color-shifting eyes locked on her. Its small head tilted, and that broken pipe sound came again, softer this time. "Yeah, I know," Grace muttered, straightening up with effort. "I'm an idiot. Should have worn the upgraded containment suit." The cub's eyes flickered from purple to gold and back. It took one careful step forward, pressing its nose against the glass. Grace's wrist communicator exploded with static. Then, Kthri's voice crackled through. The senior council member's mandibles always clicked when he talked, creating this constant background percussion. "Medic Grace, your biosignature shows contamination. Explain immediately." Grace jabbed the communicator with one finger. "Yeah, thanks, Kthri. I hadn't noticed the blue-green stuff I'm coughing up, or the way the room keeps tilting. Real helpful." The mandible clicking intensified. "This is not appropriate." "I'm activating Emergency Research Protocol 39, Grace interrupted, pulling up a screen on the medical console with shaking hands. "I'm the contaminated subject now, which means I can run live studies on the infection progression." "You cannot." "I absolutely can. It's in my contract. Either help me collect useful data before I become a corpse, or shut up and let me work." She cut the connection, then immediately regretted it when the room spun hard enough that she had to sit down on the floor. The cold metal felt good against her overheating skin. The cub was making that sound again. Grace turned her head and watched it pace back and forth in the container, 6 legs moving in this weird rhythmic pattern, front 2, middle 2, back 2. "I'm fine," she told it, which was such an obvious lie that even an alien creature could probably see through it. The blast door to the medical bay exploded inward with emergency override hydraulics. Voron filled the doorway. The massive reptilian military commander's purple-blue scales caught the red emergency lighting, making him look like a mobile bruise. His 3 vertical eyes blinked in sequence, and his clawed hands gripped a weapon that looked like it could vaporize a small moon. "Human Grace," he rumbled, his voice like gravel in a blender. "You will submit to immediate quarantine transport." Grace, still sitting on the floor, held up one middle finger. "Counteroffer. You leave me alone to work, and I don't cough on you." All 3 of Voron's vertical eyes widened. His scales shifted from purple-blue to something more greenish. He took 2 steps backward, weapon still raised. "But here's the thing, Voron." Grace used the examination table to pull herself back to standing, legs shaking. "I'm the only human medic on this station. And right now, I'm both the patient and the doctor, which is either incredibly convenient or the universe's worst joke." Voron's middle eye focused on the specimen container, where the cub was still pressed against the glass. "The creature must be destroyed. It is the infection source." "No." The word came out harder than Grace intended. She moved to stand between Voron and the container, which was stupid because he was 8 feet tall and could probably bench press a shuttle. "That cub is the only living carrier that hasn't died. It's asymptomatic, which means somewhere in its biology is the key to surviving this thing." Voron's scales rippled. "It has killed 4. It didn't kill anyone." Grace grabbed another cloth as another cough built in her chest. More blue-green. The infection killed them. The cub is just carrying it. And if I can figure out why it's not dying, maybe I can figure out how to stop the rest of us from dying. She gestured at herself with the stained cloth. Starting with me, since I've got the most immediate motivation. Voron's clawed hand landed on the console. All three of his vertical eyes fixed on her with something that might have been concern. You will collapse before you find answers. Grace was about to argue when the cub made that broken pipe sound again, louder this time. She turned to look at the container. The cub was standing on its hind 4 legs, front 2 legs pressed against the glass. Its eyes had gone completely gold, bright and urgent. It made the sound again, then started scratching at the glass with one small paw. What is it doing? Voron moved closer. Grace moved toward the container, legs unsteady. The cub tracked her movement, eyes never leaving her face. When she got close enough, it pressed its nose to the glass again, then deliberately turned and looked at the container's locking mechanism. Then back at Grace. Then at the lock again. Oh, absolutely not, Voron growled, scales going full dark purple. You will not release the infection vector. It wants out, Grace said, her hand hovering over the release panel. Her medical training, her common sense, all of it was screaming that this was the worst idea in the history of terrible decisions. But the cub was looking at her with those gold eyes, and something in her gut said this mattered. Human Grace, Voron's voice had gone dangerous. If you release that creature while infected, you could contaminate the entire station. Yeah, Grace said, her finger touching the release panel. Or I could find out why it's not dead yet. She pressed the button. The container hissed as the pressure seal broke. The front panel slid upward. Voron raised his weapon, and Grace just stood there, swaying slightly, waiting to see if this was going to be brilliant or fatal. The cub didn't attack. It didn't thrash or run. It walked out calmly on all 6 legs, crossed the 3 feet of sterile medical bay floor, and sat down directly in front of Grace. Then it looked up at her and made that broken pipe sound, soft and almost gentle. Grace started to kneel down, but her legs gave out halfway, and she ended up sitting hard on the floor instead. The cub immediately moved forward, climbing into her lap before she could process what was happening. Wait. But the cub was already there, small, warm body pressed against her chest. It turned its head, pressing its fuzzy ear against her sternum, right over her heart. Grace froze. Voron stood perfectly still, like he was watching a bomb countdown. The cub's eyes slowly shifted from gold to a deep, steady purple. It made that sound again, but different this time. Lower, rhythmic, almost like a purr mixed with wind chimes. Grace's chest, which had been tight and painful for hours, suddenly felt less terrible. Not better exactly, but like someone had turned down the volume on the pain. What? She started to say, but another cough interrupted her. She turned her head to cough into her shoulder. The cub pressed its head more firmly against her chest. The purr chime sound intensified. When the coughing ended, Grace looked down at the cloth in her hand. Still blue-green, but less. Definitely less. Impossible, Voron breathed, his weapon slowly lowering. The infection does not regress. Grace's brain started making connections. It's not regressing. It's being stabilized. She looked down at the cub, which was still pressed against her chest, eyes closed, making that rhythmic sound. You're not a carrier. You're a filter. That's why you're not sick. You're processing the infection somehow, breaking it down. The cub's eyes opened slightly, purple and calm. You weren't giving me the infection, Grace whispered, running her hand carefully over the cub's silver-gray fur. You were trying to help. I need a scanner, Grace said, reaching for the medical equipment on the table above her. Now. Voron moved fast, grabbing a handheld medical scanner and pressing it into Grace's palm. She activated it with shaking fingers, running it over both herself and the cub. The data that flooded the screen made her laugh, which hurt, which made the cub press harder against her in response. It's producing enzymes, Grace said, staring at the readings. Specialized enzymes that break down the infection's protein structure. It's been trying to do this the whole time I had it in the container. That's why it was so agitated. It could sense I was sick, and it couldn't help through the glass. She looked up at Voron. The 4 crew members who died, they never had direct contact with the cub, did they? They got infected from contaminated surfaces. Voron's scales rippled with understanding. They died because they did not have access to the creature's assistance. Exactly. Grace saved the scanner data with fingers that were already steadier. This cub isn't the problem, it's the solution. But the cub cannot heal an entire station, Voron said. If there is another outbreak, that's why we synthesize the enzymes. Grace was already pulling up genetic sequencing protocols. If I can isolate exactly what the cub produces and replicate it artificially, we can create a treatment, maybe even a cure. She looked down at the cub, which had opened its eyes and was watching her face. You knew, didn't you? That's why you were trying to get out. The cub made a small chirp, almost like agreement. How long? Voron asked. How long to synthesize a treatment? Grace ran the numbers. 8 to 12 hours for a working prototype. You are still infected, Voron pointed out. Can you work for that duration? Grace looked down at the cub pressed against her chest, felt the steady rhythm of its healing purr. I've got the best medicine on the station sitting in my lab. I'll manage. She carefully started to stand, cradling the cub against her chest. Voron immediately moved to help, his large clawed hand supporting her elbow. Also, Grace added, getting to her feet with effort, I'm naming her Hope. The creature is male, Voron said, his scales rippling with amusement. Don't care. Her name is Hope. My cub, my rules. Hope made that purr chime sound again, like she agreed. The next 10 hours blurred together. Grace worked through research, synthesis trials, and increasingly stable vital signs. She had 3 more coughing fits, each less severe than the last. Hope pressed against her chest like a small, determined medical device. Voron brought samples. By hour 5, Grace had isolated the primary enzyme. By hour 9, they had a working synthesis protocol. By hour 12, they had enough treatment doses for every crew member on the station. Grace leaned back in her chair, Hope still tucked against her chest, and pulled up her own latest bioscan. The blue-green traces in her lungs were almost gone. Respiratory function at 92%. Fever broken. We did it, she told Hope quietly. The cub's eyes opened, shifting from purple to gold to purple again. You did it, really. Hope made that chirp sound, then stretched all 6 legs in a way that was unmistakably smug. The medical bay door opened, and Kthri finally appeared. The insectoid counselor's bronze chitinous armor clicking as he moved, his 4 arms gesturing in agitation, compound eyes reflecting the harsh lights. Medic Grace. His mandibles clicked rapidly. You have violated protocols 14, 28, and 56. You released a quarantine specimen. I cured a plague, Grace interrupted, holding up a vial of synthesized treatment. While dying from said plague, with help from the cub you wanted to destroy. Kthri's mandibles stopped clicking. All 4 of his arms froze. The treatment is stable, tested, and ready for distribution, Grace continued, gesturing at the screens. 0 side effects, 98% efficacy rate. We can start station-wide vaccination in 6 hours. Kthri moved closer, his compound eyes scanning the data. His mandibles started clicking again, slower this time. Thoughtful. The creature did this? Hope, Grace corrected. Her name is Hope. And yes, she did. She's been trying to help since we found her. We just didn't understand. Kthri was silent for a long moment. Finally, his mandibles clicked in what Grace recognized as grudging respect. You are still in violation of... Don't care, Grace said cheerfully. Hope made a supporting chirp. Write me up if you want. I'll be too busy saving lives to read it. Voron, standing nearby, made a sound that might have been a laugh. His scales rippled with amusement. Kthri's 4 arms crossed in a complex pattern. The council will want a full report. Great. It'll be ready in 3 days, after I've slept for 48 hours. Grace stood, cradling Hope carefully. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have vaccination protocols to finalize and a cub to feed. Grace moved toward the door, exhausted but alive. Hope, a warm weight against her chest. Voron fell into step beside her. You know, Voron said quietly, most humans would have followed protocols, kept the creature contained, waited for official approval. Grace looked up at him, then down at Hope, who had fallen asleep purring. Most humans haven't had a cub decide they're worth saving. Hope chose to help me. Least I could do was trust her back. Voron's 3 vertical eyes blinked in sequence. Your species is very strange, We get that a lot, Grace agreed. Hope made a sleepy chirp. Behind them, Kethrix's mandibles clicked one more time. The report, meta Grace. 3 days. 4 days, Grace called back. I'm adding 24 hours for trauma recovery. Hope's purr intensified, vibrating against Grace's chest like approval. Either way, Grace figured they'd earned it.